let's compare each of these 3 Nolan movies to a Nick. It doesn't have to be a current Nick. It could be a past Nick.
Okay.
I think the easiest one.
Oh, I already know where you're going, and I already know where I'm going to stand on this side of the fence. Go ahead.
You think I'm going to compare Melo to Dark Knight?
Yes, something is beloved by many, but you two can't seem to find the joy in.
First of all,
here we go.
Okay, this is now what this pod is.
Yes.
This is me taking a stand against you, sir. You trying to pigeonhole me as someone who dislikes and dishonors the memory and the great legacy of one Carmelo Anthony in a Knicks uniform.
Fine. Prove me wrong. Go ahead. Change my mind. I'm sitting at the table with the sign, John.
First of all, I've been on record in our, if not our text chain, then the text chain that I have longer running text chain I have with Oz and Yash. Mm-hmm. Carmelo Anthony's first ballot Hall of Famer, right? Bernard, am I saying any lie?
That's
obvious. True. You first said that.
First ballot Hall of Famer, all-time great player. I think he has a good argument for being a top 50 player ever. I would have to really sit down and quibble with but he's in the conversation for being in the top 50 ever. He's the greatest Knick since Patrick Ewing. There's no question about that. And I think he was a great Knick. I think there's an argument for retiring his jersey. Even though he more seasons than not, he didn't win here. I don't think it was all his fault. My only thing with him is that I've been unwilling to be as effusive as like Carmelo Anthony was the second coming, when to me in this city, despite the fact that we've not done much winning in a very long time, you do need to achieve some modicum of success in the postseason. And he won one playoff series. Is that his fault? No, it's probably not his fault, but like, that's my only is that unreasonable? It's like me saying RJ Barrett's over under for All-Star appearances is 2.5, and then me being labeled a hater of RJ Barrett for taking that stance. Come on.
First of all, once again, why do you hate RJ Barrett? But we do not have to get into that on this podcast. I think everything you've said, I agree with. And ironically, Oz was with me with Schwinn when Schwinn said top 60, and I was like, I'd actually go lower than that.
I think I had the highest rating. I was like clearly in the back of the top 50, and you guys both cracked me back on that. And I'm the hater. So
I think Carmelo Anthony is one of the more gifted scorers this sport has ever seen. And as we've seen throughout this decade and parts of last decade, although last decade you could get away with just a pure scorer being your best player and finding role players around him and you'd be successful. Allen Iverson being the best example of that. Made a finals because the league was so stretched out in their talent that all you needed was a dominant scorer and you'd be fine. And as the league progressed and as talent became more of a surplus in this league, you needed a big 2. You needed a big 3. And Melo's best 2 and 3 were J.R. Smith and Tyson Chandler and like half a year of Jason Kidd. And they're like, I more blame management for that. And I think a lot of the blame for Melo's shortcomings when he came here and then what happened after that are, in my opinion, I've come to a realization I'm just in the minority. I am in the minority on what happened with the trade and how detrimental it was. And then, what happened when Phil Jackson took over. That's all. I just think he gets scapegoated as like this dark era and what Donnie Walsh's plan being ruined, even though Donnie Walsh spent 2 years sitting on cap space so he can get LeBron and then didn't. Wow.
So, shots fired.
I'm sorry.
You're sitting probably enjoying a cocktail in Indiana right now, and you're just shrapnel.
I'm sorry, but the guy, and all we have to hear is that Donnie Walsh was infatuated by Steph Curry. And it was like, there's a shame that we dropped one spot too far. How about you trade up, Donnie? How about you get a little proactive instead of waiting for something to happen, just like what happened in the summer of 2010, when you walked away with Amari Stoudemire, called it a victory, had this fan base convinced that 4 people that to this day have never made an all-star team are the assets that would have changed the Knicks if we didn't trade for Carmelo. And yet, here we are. I get what you guys are going to say about asset management, and it's hilarious. It's hilarious that people are like,
I've never seen you this fired up.
We could have traded for Chris Paul. Yeah, because I associate playoff success with trading for Chris Paul. That's exactly what happened.
Hold on, we're going off the
multiple arguments being on. Melo deserves his flowers, and I'm glad Macri is finally giving it.
I think, and Bernard, I want to hear your thoughts on this. I guess first of all, on the top 50 thing, the original top 50 list the NBA made, I guess, a little over 20 years ago now. My God, I am old. Dominique Wilkins was left off that, and it was very controversial at the time. People, I think, were in agreement that he was like 51, right? 45, 51. Carmelo Anthony's kind of the modern day Dominique Wilkins, except Dominique Wilkins sadly kind of had a little bit more playoff success, although he never made it to a conference finals. Melo did in Denver. Yeah, but like similar players. So in any case, the thing that I focus on is Melo was part of some teams that were not just bad, were atrocities. And there are other quote unquote great players that have been part of some pretty bad teams, but like, I don't know, there's no knock on him being part of a 17-win team. There's no knock. I mean, he played with Derrick Rose.
He barely played that. He barely played that year. I thought he got hurt early in the season, and then after the All-Star break, barely played. I thought
I looked about this. I know.
I looked it up the other day. Okay, sir. He played in 31. It's first 35 games, I think, or 30 of like the first 34, and they were 5-29, and they were 0-4 in the games he missed. So they were 5-24 in the games he played. Now, look, is that all on him? No, that roster was utterly dog shit in so many ways. Like, and they used like 40 different starting lineups that season. It's absurd. Terrible, terrible team, but he was like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know what I fault him more for. Maybe
Go ahead, us.
No, please.
Let me, and this pains me. I've said many nasty things about him on this podcast before, but let me mount a half-hearted defense of Carmelo Anthony's legacy, which is this. He was fantastic, top of the charts at a skill that we don't value anymore, which is volume scoring inside the three-point arc. He's great at it. And we don't care about ISO scorers as we look at the game in 2021. And it's a little bit unfair because he was evaluated in real time based on the skill that he was very good at. I think it's almost unfair to him that his legacy is colored by the fact that 90s style analysis looked at Carmelo Anthony as a top 5 player. We were sold a bill of goods that we were getting a top 5 player. And then we got a guy who in reality was like a top 25-ish player because his skill set was in the process of being left behind.
That's the key.
The entire time.
The league was changing as his career was unfolding.
Correct. And he, for whatever reason, didn't have the capability to shift gears and become a different sort of player that would work in the new normal.
And that's what I hold against him a little bit.
Agreed. We saw the teases. We saw the Dad Melo tease. There were moments where we thought to ourselves, wow, he could take the next step. He could be a modern 4 and this could really be something. And it never happened. It never materialized. Yeah. And it makes him fucking frustrating. And the other thing is that from a sabermetric perspective, he's a dude who shows up on every one of the most overrated players of his era list, in part because he was a somewhat dinosaur player in an era of great transition. It's hard to be the 300 hitter when everyone starts hitting 50 home runs or something like that. It's just it's a tough place for his legacy because those Knicks teams, as John said, aside from really like one good year, those Knicks 1.5 were fucking brutal. Yeah. And it's hard to erase the sort of gut feel of the pre-Melo with Amare, but pre-Melo Knicks, which were just so goddamn fun. Probably the most fun team in recent Knicks memory until this past year.
Talking about specifically the first 50 games of that.
Yeah, exactly. The pre-trade deadline season. That team was fun. It had a good feel.
That 10 games of Stoudemire where he was like, oh my God, is he going to win the MVP?
Yes, it was amazing. It was so fun. It was unbelievable. And I mean, that was a season full of such hope. And he was supposed to be the next step there. And it just never had the right feel. I was on the first date with my now wife, the first playoff game that season. We had to like cut our dinner short because I was like, we have to go to a bar. We should have another drink, but let's go to a bar now.
That should have been a clue to her to run for the hills.
I know, very dumb.
Clue that I think she's wished she's taken many times over the years, but continue.
Dude, someday I'm going to come home and my key is not going to work in the lock, but whatever. She saw a preview day one and put up with this shit. But it's just that was a special team, and it felt like a promise unfulfilled to me. And I think a lot of fans have that sort of mouthfeel for a Melo.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans, and I this is going to sound wrong, but I don't mean it this way. I think a lot of fans like you two feel that way because they don't look at the 2010 season as that special. They were 20-18 when they made the Melo trade. That stretch with Amari going off, yeah, it was great, which is why you thought pairing him with a Carmelo Anthony would be great. And it is almost as if his health went off a cliff, and now Melo was looking for a new sidekick. So that's at least my response. I think people more look at the 2013 season as special. That's where you designate that season. That was a special season, and the Knicks didn't know how to recreate it the following season, which I don't put the blame on Carmelo Anthony for that. I put them on the guys that were in charge of putting a team together.
It's such a veteran mercenary squad. It's going out and getting all these aged folks in and tossing them together. Sometimes that shit works. Sometimes it doesn't. It's not as though that team was a sustainable thing that's going to go on a 5-year run when Jason Kidd is your point guard. What is he, 40 at that point? It's just not what you can feasibly build around.
I mean, look, we can pick apart the Carmelo Anthony era, and I think to your point, Andrew, the lion's share of the blame lies on the decision-making processes of those who were running the team at that time. I'm not disputing that. Could different superstar players in that role have done more or differently to, it's like 2013-14. Yes, some of the vets left the squad, but they still had the bones of it. And they started off, what were they, 2-9 to start off that year? Something, it cratered it, from like, where does the blame lie there? Like, are we going back and like analyzing game by, we're not going to do that.
But if you want me to, I can say J.R. Smith wasn't even close to what he was the year before. Steve Novak was off the team at that point. He didn't come back.
No, I think Novak
was he there.
He was there.
I'll look it up.
I'm trying to remember when it was that I was upset that Steve Novak was gone, but it might have been 2015. Regardless, like the key thing is that the Knicks looked at what they lost at the end of 2013 and then went into 2014 and said, you know what, we'll fix everything. Andrea Bargnani. And that is why I can't blame Carmelo for not being able to win with Andrea Bargnani.
You might win the argument with that, which
is the thing is, I don't even think it's that complex of an argument. I think largely at its core, the three of us agree about Melo. I think he could have been the best player, the second best player on a team that won the championship in this era, which maybe if he did get Chris Paul, both of their skills match better and Melo can play off ball more because he has shown in his career that if he has a competent point guard, he's willing to share a little more. It's he didn't pass enough to Landry Fields or Iman Shumpert and these guys that weren't great shooters to begin with. Like, how dare you not pass to Jose Calderon? Like the 17-win season, midway through that season, Tyson Chandler was gone. Iman Shumpert was gone. Who went in the J.R. Smith went in that trade? It
was J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert.
Right. So it's like they stripped that team and Melo's like, all right, I'm going to go get surgery. Call me when we have talent back on this team, which I don't necessarily blame him for.
I think the argument, and I'm not saying it's a great argument, but it's the argument is that, like, you look at a guy like Kemba Walker, who for the meat of his career in Charlotte, like, we love Kemba Walker. We love him here as a Knick now. But like, there was the 1 year he had, so like he had his version of the 2012-13 year in 2015-16 when they won 48 games. And the next 3 years after that, 36 wins, 39 wins with some rosters that if you go back and look at, I mean, you want to talk about piddling? Mm-hmm. It's just not what you want. And it's like, things spiraled out of control here, but that's also because like all the attention was focused on it. And there was, it's the Phil Jackson drama and like, there's lots of reasons for it. And things really cratered out or, cratered a few times, I think.
Can I give you a better comp?
Sure.
How did we view Devin Booker before this season?
Oh yeah.
Like the guys asked to do one thing on that team is score. And then
he's young though.
But like Melo through most of his career in the beginning was a first round exit. Like he was barely probably had more playoff success than Devin Booker because he was at least making the playoffs. But Melo was asked to do one thing for those Nuggets teams, and it was score. Then they put him with a point guard. He made the conference finals. Can't fault him for not beating Kobe Bryant in one of the last great years of Kobe Bryant, especially once Kobe, as most of Kobe's career, got a low post threat that he could play off of. I look at Melo's career more as if he ever got the point guard, and maybe it was Chris Paul, maybe it could have been. We'll never know about the trade. I still think a lot of us are misremembering what that season was like. I remember that was like the first year I started listening to podcasts.
Which season are you talking about when they almost traded for Chris Paul?
Well, no, the season that they traded for Melo. That's like the first year I discovered that people didn't talk on WFAN and had other mediums to talk about sports, right? That was the first year where I was like, I found the BS report. I found, other people that were just talking about sports, and the way they were talking about that offseason and what the CBA was coming, every player from the players union from up top was being told, get your money now. We have no idea if we're playing next year. You might miss an entire year of your prime. Like, get on your next contract before the season ends, which is why Melo forced his hand. Now you can project, because we know what happened, like, oh, they played on Christmas and now the CBA actually is very player friendly. But I remember being in the moment, like, they kind of have to get Melo now, or else he's going to go sompla else to get his money.
I don't.
And then we're still sitting here waiting for Donnie Walsh to do something. So.
No, I don't disagree with that. Gets us to like the Dame thing. Like there is a logic where when you could get the guy, you get the guy, and you worry about the rest later.
Can I ask a what if? Since I want to now prove that I do read John's newsletter, even though this week's been really busy and apparently I missed something recently.
It's okay. Sure.
So speaking of what ifs, if they did do that Kyle Lowry trade that Dolan steps in and you get a mini like 3-year run of Melo and Lowry, what's the peak of that team? Is it the Lowry DeRozan teams? Like, so potentially a couple of conference finals?
So I have to go back and recall for myself the Kyle Lowry trade, I believe, was almost made not during the Bargs, the 2013-14
2 years
season.
later. Yeah, it was 2 years later.
But but no, I don't know if that's right, because Kyle Lowry made the All-Star team in 2014-15. So, and 2014-15 was the year that the Knicks won 17 games. So I think the almost Lowry trade was in 2013-14. Andrew, if you want to,
I'll look it up. Yeah,
I'll confirm that. Because that only makes sense, because they would have it has to, because you know what, they would have the whole thing was Dolan didn't want to give up Shumpert, right, for Lowry, and in 2014-15 they ended up trading Amon Shumpert just to get rid of J.R. Smith So I'm going to assume it was in the 13-14 season, which is when they had just traded for Bargs. And am I correct?
You are correct.
Okay.
Your rumored trade was Meta World Peace, Amon Shumpert, and a 2018 first round pick.
Okay. Yes. I think it's fascinating because Felton was still the point guard for the rest of that year, his last year in New York. He was not as good because he really wasn't being like Jason Kidd was kind of the nominal shooting guard on the 12-13 team, even though like Felton was listed as the point guard, but like they shared duties. It worked.
He was the Lonzo. He was a connector.
Yeah, it was a weird brew, and it worked. You put Lowry on the 13-14 Knicks. They fell a game short of the playoffs. I say Lowry gets them to the playoffs. And if they get to the playoffs, because don't forget, they finished that season 16-5 in the last 21 games for Mike Woodson. They were rampaging. If they get in the playoffs, can Phil Jackson fire Mike Woodson?
Ooh.
Or can he replace, I don't know if he fired him, but like not renew him, whatever, I forget the contract situation, but basically replace him with Derek Fisher. I'm not sure that he can.
If he makes it in, you have to think he stays, especially with the way they wrapped up the season. I mean, look,
which is a stupid reason.
It's all counterfactual bullshit at this point, but that is sort of fascinating. I really, I think he has to stay. And it's hard not to think about how the Lowry, Baby Hardaway at that point fit might have actually worked out. I think the steps that we've seen Hardaway take at the end of his Knicks time, but also in Dallas, might actually have happened in faster progress with someone like Lowry around him. It's sort of an interesting scenario. And I kind of think it does save Woodson and delay a lot of the hellscape that we came to watch afterwards.
It's funny because I constantly have this idea we always get back to RJ Barrett, where maybe if RJ Barrett isn't the most talented player on the team that he's on, he like eventually becomes like the leader of the team that he's on and like maybe the most important guy in the locker room or something like that. So to me, this would have been perfect because I think everything that I was saying before, the better way to like, condense that into one sentence is that Carmelo Anthony was probably not meant to be the galvanizing force that will be like, okay, guys, we know the chips are down, but we're not going to let go of the rope. We're going to stick this thing out like that, because guess what? Several teams let go of the rope. Lowry, no, I mean, listen, can we at least agree on that?
No, I agree completely.
Okay, Andrew, can we like
what that
several Knicks teams that he was on did let go of the rope?
Define let go of the rope. We're bad. Like we're
ended
bad.
Up sucking ass and not caring about the fact that they suck ass.
That is correct. Okay. Because there's a difference between like the team wasn't good enough to be better, and there's like they
unwatchable
quit.
Shit
like
ball.
they quit. Which the back half of the 2 50-loss seasons under Hornacek, where I guess the Hornacek and the second Fisher season were very frustrating because it's like, oh, they could be better, but there's clearly nothing making them better.
So this is a really tough conversation to have because that following offseason, so the 2013-14, let's say they get into the playoffs and they lose in the first round. Mm-hmm. Phil Jackson's first major move as GM was trading Tyson Chandler and Felton to the Mavs for Jose Calderon, the immortal Sam Dallenberg, Wayne Ellington, by the way, still relatively young Wayne Ellington, Shane Larkin, we all love Shane Larkin, and then the picks that would become Thanasis and Antetokounmpo and Clay Anthony Early selected over Nikola Jokic, by the way.
You want to talk about somebody that Knicks fans were excited about that didn't matter? Clay Anthony Early
drank all the Kool-Aid. Any and all Kool-Aid that was available for me to drink. I consumed it. So presumably they do not draft or they do not make that specific trade because they'd have Kyle Lowry and there would be no need to upgrade, big air quote energy here, upgrade at point guard to Jose Calderon. But there was also the thing about Chandler and Melo in the locker room. Again, it all comes back to Melo, that like Melo wouldn't resign if Chandler was still here. Don't tell me I'm the only one who remembers this.
I thought they were tight. I didn't realize that there was a rift there.
Okay. I vaguely recall that there was a falling out of sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that
what did Tyson Chandler do after he left? So if anything, get on Melo.
Yeah, no, that it was probably right to trade him, but maybe. So let's just say this: maybe there's a different trade that gets made. Or there's a different return or something, and like it's not Calderon, and it's just and then how do they fill out the rest of the roster? Tyson Chandler was making a good deal of money at that time. I don't know who else they could have traded him for, who else may have wanted him. That's the tough part for me. I just don't, because that roster. This is the answer to the question, is like that roster in 14-15, and this really is the best defensive Melo. That roster was atrocious. Mm-hmm. I mean, they were really bad. Like they had Langston Galloway, rookie year Langston Galloway. But it's not what you want. So.
And then we can wrap up Melo talk after this. The only other thing I'll say is what followed that 14-15 season was then 2 straight seasons of Phil Jackson trying to play like division by, not even division by subtraction, but like divide and advance, like he used to do in the 90s, where it's like, I'll turn Scotty against Michael, and then I'll turn the media against them. And then
he had KP and he wanted to
Well, like
around KP.
I actually don't know if it was that simple. But he was doing it from up top and not in the locker room is my point. He was like, you need to run the triangle, but I'm going to go live in California and you need to do this. And Charlie Rosen, write an article for a website that doesn't exist anymore.
It was all nonsense.
So like the dysfunction that then like gave him a no trade clause. And then everybody's asking him, why does Melo not want to waive his no trade clause? Like, because you gave it to me. I'd want to win here. You know, we want to rebuild around KP, but we're going to sign Joakim Noah to $72 million and Courtney Lee to $50-something million and trade for Derrick Rose.
Yeah. You know, I once saw Phil Jackson at a bar during a Knicks game across the street from a Broadway theater in January of 2015. Very tall, actually kind of a handsome fellow up close, but yeah, he was there with Jeannie and two other folks. They were just sitting at a table at the bar.
Can I ask
I went to see once the musical right after. Yes.
Was he watching the game at least?
No, there was no TV in the bar.
Watching
there was no TV.
It was a theater bar. It was a theater bar. I think he went to the same showing of Once on Broadway after. It was like the last week Once was playing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that was my close encounter with Phil Jackson, who was very, very committed to the New York Knickerbockers.
I thought you were about to say very, very committed to the cocktail in front of him.
Two things. One,
no, I think he was going through them very quickly. It was just a real
two things.
Spring break vibe.
Once is as good as you said, by the way. I finally watched it. It's very good. There's a movie Once that Oz recommended, which is a theme of Final Review. Oz recommends a movie I've never seen. Hey, it's actually pretty good. And the revisionist history, some have tried with Phil Jackson and his tenure here. My trump card, my final word, I feel like the argument against anyone that wants to say the Phil Jackson era wasn't that bad. Because like they've said, like, oh, he wanted to trade Porzingis for Devin Booker. And then where would we be?
Hi, Yash.
Fell asleep in the Donovan Mitchell workout. That's all I have to say. Donovan Mitchell's in front of him.
Was it confirmed that was the workout he fell asleep in front of?
Donovan Mitchell said he fell asleep in my workout.
Yeah, I did. I've never seen that. That's news to me. Okay.
That's like anyone that's like, oh, we took Frank over Donovan Mitchell. Well, we can blame Phil Jackson for that. So. I
like Donovan Mitchell. I don't
tend to like Donovan Mitchell too.
I don't go around defending Phil Jackson, nor will I. That was not the job he was suited for. He might not have been suited for that job when he was 35, let alone when he was 90, whenever it was when he took the job.
I think he has a lot more in common basketball wise with Isaiah's tenure than people want to admit is what I'll say.
Different.
The man was very happy the checks cleared.
Yeah,
pretty much.
I think Leon Rose is getting paid more than him, by the way, but possibly a lot more, and he has earned as much.